Should you retire now or work one more year? That question goes further back than you think. Meet Otto von Bismarck, Germany's Iron Chancellor, ruthless, no-nonsense, and ironically, the man who created health insurance in 1883, workers' comp in 1884, and retirement in 1889. Before Bismarck, people simply worked until the end. Retirement changed everything. Suddenly, people were asking new questions. What will I do with my time? Where will I live? And importantly, should I work one more year? It's this last question we will explore next on Holy Schmidt.
Holy Schmidt!
Many people underestimate how impactful one extra year of work before retirement can be. Some, in fact many, look at it as a throwaway decision. But it is actually one of the most important questions you can ask yourself at the point in time when you're ready to retire. Time is the only asset that you truly can't get back. And your health peaks probably around your midlife, so 20 years earlier in many cases. And the fact is, delaying 1 year often leads to delaying 2 or 3 or more. But there are reasons that people delay. One of the big ones is that people think that they're going to struggle to find something to do. But the fact is, in retirement, there's plenty to do if you really put your mind to it. It's not lack of things to do, it's lack of purpose. Retirees who plan ahead find a very full retirement in the areas of travel or hobbies, part-time work, volunteer work. There are a lot of things that they can do that give them life satisfaction. A lot of people look to previous generations as their model. They see mom and dad, grandma and grandpa. They retired, they sat on the rocking chair, and they whittled for the better part of the next 30 years. But your grandfather's retirement is not your retirement. Other people are worried about their social connections disappearing because they have social connections at work. Every day you interact with dozens of people, often, maybe even more, depending on what you do and where you do it. But social connections don't need to disappear when you retire. And if you think about that with intent, you can start to build your retirement social connections now and continue to build them in retirement. I know people that have put that as their top priority, and I've seen them build more friends in retirement than they ever had during their working years, simply because they did things like reconnect with old friends from their teenage years. They also got involved in clubs, volunteer organizations, and a lot of other options out there to build connection and keep connected. And there's an addiction to stress at work. Now, people say, what are you talking about, Jeff? But that stress that you feel when you're trying to hit a deadline, when you're working with 2 or 3 or 4 other people to get a report out or a project up, is not something that is sustainable throughout your retirement life. In fact, it's actually quite unhealthy. But it is addictive. But you can replace work stress with other things that might be time-bound and get greater satisfaction about delivering whatever it is that you're working on. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking that they're going to have unlimited time in retirement. Now, just because your calendar is clear doesn't mean that you have unlimited years ahead. In fact, the number of years in front of you are less, in most cases, than the number of years behind you, unless you are very fortunate in retiring at a point in time where basically nobody else was able to retire. Many retirees say that they waited too long to retire. They can't travel the way that they wanted to because their energy isn't there anymore. Or they can't travel with the people that they wanted to because they're no longer around. Don't mistake time flexibility for time abundance. Research shows that enjoyment peaks in early retirement. At age 60, people have enjoyed 60 years of relatively good health. But more than likely, it's not going to be that way on the other end. There's an author named Peter Attia. He wrote the book called Outlive. And in the book, he talks about the difference between lifespan and health span. Lifespan is the number of years you live. Health span is the number of years you live well. And people tend to live well, more likely, in early retirement and middle retirement than they do in late retirement. That's not always the case, of course. There are people that rock up to late retirement and they're doing great all the way through, but that's the exception more than the rule. Now, based on what I've just said, you've got to be thinking Jeff is a proponent of retiring early. Well, I am if you can afford it, but also there are some practical issues that need to be dealt with. The financial issues. and other issues that come with work that are actually quite positive. Working one more year means that there's one more year you can contribute to your retirement account. Also, it's 1 year less that you draw from your retirement account. So you're saving that year, you're banking that year, and that can be a very big number on the other end. And if you decided to work another year, we have some options because you are willing to go without a paycheck. That means that you can probably contribute fully to your company's retirement account. And if your company offers a match, you get a year more of a match. Those contributions reduce your taxable income in the current year if it's not a Roth 401k, for example, and that allows you to defer taking the funds out when you could potentially be in a lower income bracket. And a lot of people, when they go into retirement, move down in tax brackets. It's just the function of retiring. You spend less. Waiting another year means that you can potentially, anyway, push off claiming Social Security for a year. Depends on when you retire. If you retire before you reach age 62, well, then it won't really matter whether you retire this year or next year. You can't start taking Social Security until age 62. But the longer you wait to take Social Security, the larger the payment becomes. And the survivor benefit is tied to the size of the primary insured's Social Security payment, the person who's waiting. So the longer the person waits and the bigger the payment becomes, the bigger the survivor benefit. And waiting another year might help you get past issues that have plagued you. If, for example, you retire in a bad year, in a bad market, and you start drawing from your retirement accounts, well, you're selling your assets in your retirement account basically at a discount from what they were in the previous year. By waiting another year, you may be able to recoup the loss and maybe even have a gain in your account. Who knows? You might have debt that you need to pay off, and you need that year to pay down that debt. As a general rule, you shouldn't go into retirement with debt, especially credit card debt. Now, there are some differences of opinion on mortgage debt because interest rates were so low for so long. The people's mortgages are actually quite low. But if you're a debt evangelist, then no debt is good debt. But pragmatically speaking, if you've got a low mortgage payment at a low interest rate and you can use those funds elsewhere, well, it's something to consider. Still, debt, generally speaking, is not something you want to take into retirement. And you may just not be emotionally ready to go. Maybe you're at the top of your game in your job. You love what you do. You're recognized as the person, the expert, the one that everybody goes to. And as soon as you leave, that all goes away. It's a real concern, and it does happen. So when somebody says that they're happy to leave, oftentimes they're happy to leave because they weren't happy when they were there. So what's the answer? Well, it depends on your specific situation, but let me give you some things to consider. Obviously, we haven't talked, so these are things for you to contemplate. These aren't recommendations. The first is your health. If you have longevity in your family, if you're relatively healthy, if your partner's healthy, well, maybe waiting one more year won't hurt. But if the opposite is true, where you don't have longevity in your family, you're not very healthy yourself, and or your partner isn't healthy, and so your time ahead might be limited, well, that might suggest not retiring later, but retiring earlier. Next are life events themselves. You might have a son or daughter who's getting married and moving away, maybe even far away. I have a relative who moved to Asia because that's where their partner was from. And because of that, the parents don't really get to see their child very often. If that sounds like you, well, maybe retiring a little bit earlier might make sense because you can spend time with them before they go. Other people are saying, Jeff, what are you talking about? Good riddance. Let them go. It depends on your own situation. Or you might have a child that's in college and you have to pay for that. And they have another year before they're out. So another year of income will be quite useful paying for their college education. Perfectly legitimate, perfectly acceptable, done all of the time. I could list dozens of these. And basically they come down to big events that you need to pay attention to simply because you either need to deal with them financially, which contemplates working longer, or you need to deal with them in person, which suggests that you retire earlier. And one that almost nobody thinks about, healthcare coverage. Medicare kicks in at age 65, but if you're retiring at age 60, well, you have to figure out how to cover healthcare for the next 5 years. Now, some people will go on their spouse's plan if they have a spouse that works. Other people have an agreement with their employer where their health insurance is covered until they go on Medicare. Still others will go into the ACA marketplace and buy a health insurance policy. And then there's COBRA, which is usually the most expensive out of all of your options. You're effectively paying what your employer paid plus what you paid without any employer subsidy. And oftentimes there's a 2% administration cost from your employer. Also, are you reaching any big payout points? Do you have a pension that gives you an extra amount if you wait to a certain date? Make sure you know that date. Do you have a 401k that isn't fully vested? Maybe you switched from one company to another a few years ago and you haven't completed the vesting period. Or you have stock that was given to you and matures over a series of years ahead. All of these are things that you need to pay attention to because they all can go into that decision. Next is your financial situation itself. Have you planned for all of the biggies in retirement? Long-term care. Do you have long-term care insurance? Or are you going to pay for it out of pocket? It's quite expensive, but people with a lot of retirement savings do this from time to time. Do you have other plans? A relative, for example, who might be caring for you. It's not the optimal outcome, but if you've discussed it and you have arrangements for this, well, maybe it makes sense. Do you know how much money you actually need to retire? Have you inflation adjusted that amount? Have you taken that amount and put it into a probability calculator that gives you your probability of success? Do you have any major home repairs that need to be dealt with? Heating, air conditioning, a new roof, other mechanicals, maintenance on the outside of your house are the things that need to be repaired that you just haven't got to. But you do need to deal with them, either because you want to sell the house or you're planning on living in the house for the foreseeable future. If you're selling your current house and buying a new house and you're going to have a mortgage on your new house, will you be able to get the mortgage without evidence of employment? But whatever you do, just remember this. You're not a data point. You're not a statistic. You're a real person, and what you think and do matters. So use this information if it makes sense to you. If not, put it aside and revisit it later. If you like this video, check out that video on things you can now do now that you've turned 62. This is Jeff Schmidt, and I will see you in that video right there.